David, if I say the word religion, what do you think about?
Hey, well, it's supposed to cover just about everything. It's relationships. Humans are obsessed with relationships ever since we were gregarious apes. Of course, that implies that I have a more complex view of religion than Genesis. But we are people who crave relationships. We're descended from people who crave relationships. And we're also dealing in a dangerous and fear-fraught world. So you go back in time, it's only natural that we would reach for metaphors. Who was it who protected you against dangers? It was your father. It was the tribal leader. It was your father. So a great metaphor in religion is the father. We also have the metaphor of the shepherd. Well, in olden times, those were used interchangeably because the primary function was, protect us, please, from all these dangers. A shepherd protects his flock. Father protects his children. But this metaphor, I think, is very thought-provoking because the father and the shepherd in the modern context are almost opposites. Think, if you had a neighbor down the block who was treating his children the way a shepherd treats sheep, you'd call the cops. And I mean down the line, except for providing food and water, green pastures. Excuse me, the green pastures are just the beginning of the relationship. So I think some of the metaphors that we developed when we were afraid start to change when we become confident people. And I think this is the crux of the problem of religion today.
That it has too much of the archaic history of itself?
I think the problem of religion today is that there are two ways of approaching the time view of wisdom. One is that wisdom was received in the past in its most perfect form, and that there was a fall from a state of grace, and that the best we can hope for is to look back to wisdom in its purest form. Almost all human civilizations did this. It is called Romanticism, and almost all religions do it. But there is the look forward way of looking at wisdom, and this one replicates actual human life. A good father and a good mother want their children to be better than them. They don't want to be looked back as being wisest by the grandchildren. Confident mother and father wants to be a grandparent who actually kind of really respects their children, and they're raising their grandchildren better.
Sure.
Now that's a difficult leap. It takes confidence, it takes maturity. It's obvious to all of us watching the television in this civilization that that is the better way. But the theological implications are stunning. It means that the look forward view of wisdom as a progressively accumulated thing is better.
That's a different kind of theology.
It's a completely different kind of theology, and it implies that our old theologies may be valid, they may be valuable, but they were the kindergarten tomes, and that we are adding layers onto it. And what are these layers? What's obviously the layer that increases our wisdom and increases our knowledge? Science. The idea that science and religion have this truce. Science will push religion out of a new territory, like it did in astronomy under Galileo, and then biology, then evolution. But always there is the boundary of the human spirit. And religion says, thus far, no farther, and many scientists say, okay, and many scientists are devout. Okay? But this is a completely different way of looking at it. What if the knowledge is cumulative? And what if when we were frightened children, when we were frightened infants, we had our simple tomes, we had the simple things to rely upon, based upon authority? The lesson of the Enlightenment, the lesson of the last 500 years appears to be that the accumulation of knowledge in the look-forward view implies that we were meant to do this all along. And there's evidence for this, not only in the way a good human parent feels about a child who is entering adolescence and now is arguing joyfully and respectfully, but joyfully and with a vivid mind that's maybe even better. But the whole notion of apprenticeship. We are obviously entering God's workshop. Einstein said that the rules of nature, the laws of physics, did not have to be comprehensible. They could just as easily have been completely incomprehensible. Not the beauty of the math, the incredible, stark clarity, beauty, like any poem of Maxwell's equations. It's as if the workshop door, the workshop of creation, were left open and the lights on, the blueprints on the table and the experimental beakers left bubbling on the counter for us to play with, get our fingers burned. And the bearded master didn't stand there and say, come on in. It was almost as if we were left with the completion of Adam's temptation with the apple to come in and sneak in, not knowing that we were welcome. But think about this. If you were a creator of this vast cosmos, which prayer would make you happier? This prayer, oh, you're so big, oh, you're so great, and I'm so small. Please don't squash me and help me to be better.
Or?
I've heard it 10,000 times, 10 gazillion times. Or how about this? A bright 15-year-old in a chemistry lab doing a titration that she had read about the night before and skeptical, and then watching it all fall into place and going, oh, that's neat. Well, thank you very much. I was kind of proud of it when I thought of it. It's nice of you to notice. I mean, which would you, if you were a creator, which prayer would make you kind of jazzed to hear? The notion that science is prayer, not only that here is science and here is the soul. There's actually a metaphor in the Bible that I think speaks to this. What was the very first command given by our Creator, according to the Bible, to our very first ancestor? Not be fruitful and multiply, not don't eat the apple. Eve wasn't even around then. This is the only place in the Bible where you have nothing having to do with violence, covenants, damnation, sin or recovery from sin, how to live a life with the mark of Cain on you. It's the one place in the Bible story where God asked a favor of his creation. A favor. It's a pure distillation of what we were for before we sinned, what we would have been for if we hadn't sinned. God asks Adam to name all the beasts. To name all the beasts, to take a role in completing his creation, to help with words, because that's all Adam had. He didn't have titrations. He didn't have science. The one thing he had, the one thing his descendants had up until 500 years ago was words. So it's only natural that religion, deep people focused on words as being the way of touching God, of completing, as in the Kabbalah and many other things, completing his handiwork. But now we have other ways. We send space probes and discover far-off moons and craters and give them names. What could be more sacred if you take that interpretation?